Hello Year 5, this is another video. It's a recap of our grammar lesson dated 25th of March 2020. The title of the lesson is Complex Sentences. The aim of this lesson is to recognize and use complex sentences. Please pause the video and read the success criteria, which you should be able to do by the end of this video. What is a main clause? A main clause, or it could be called a simple clause, is a group of words that expresses one complete thought. Every main clause must contain a subject and a verb. They can also be called independent clauses. Can you spot the subjects and verbs in these main independent clauses? Yes, that's right. The subject in the first sentence is horse. The subject in the second sentence is Mr. Richardson. The verbs, on the other hand, are galloped and ate. What is a complex sentence? A complex sentence is made up of a main clause and then one or more dependent clauses. There are two ways of creating dependent clauses. By using a subordinating conjunction, example, after, to create a subordinate clause. Example, the horse galloped after it jumped the fence. Another way to create a complex sentence is by adding extra information using a relative clause. Mr. Richardson, who was feeling ravenous, ate some cheese. Firstly, let's look at creating complex sentences by using subordinate clauses that begin with a subordinating conjunction. I saw a wabub is an acronym to help you remember the first letters of some of the most important subordinating conjunctions. I saw a wabub stands for if, since, as, when, although, while, after, before, until, because. Okay, now let's see how we can use subordinating conjunctions. A subordinating conjunction is the first word we use within a subordinate clause. Subordinate clauses do not make sense on their own. They are dependent on the main clause. We need to have a main clause so that the sentence can make sense. Now, subordinate clauses will always have a subject and verb within them. If you look at the example on the left, it says before they left. Before is a subordinating conjunction. The subject is they and the verb is left. So this is a subordinate clause. If you look at the example on the right-hand side, it starts with a subordinating conjunction, but there is no subject or verb. This is a prepositional phrase, and it is not considered a subordinating conjunction. Now look at this sentence and try and spot the subordinate clause and the subordinated conjunction. It says juvenile penguins are able to swim although their feathers aren't yet waterproof. That's correct. The subordinate clause is although their feathers aren't yet waterproof. And the subordinating conjunction is although. Now can you do the same for this sentence? That's right. The subordinate clause is until it was time for bed. And you guessed it right. The subordinating conjunction is until. And again, that's correct. If he improved his juggling skills is the subordinate clause. And if is the subordinating conjunction. In the complex sentences we've looked at so far, the subordinate clause has always come after the main clause. But watch what happens when we start the sentence with a subordinating conjunction. If we start with a subordinating conjunction, that means we start with a subordinate clause. If that happens, we must put a comma after the subordinate clause. Now, can you swap these sentences around so that the subordinate clause comes before the main clause? Don't forget your commas. Pause the video, get a piece of paper, write down your sentences, and then unpause to check for the answers. Now, how can we create complex sentences using relative clauses? Relative clauses are a different type of dependent clause that give more detail about the subject of the main clause. Relative clauses begin with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. These are some examples of the most common ones: who, which, whose, whom, that, and where. In this sentence, Malcolm is the subject. The relative clause is giving extra information about Malcolm. It's telling me that Malcolm is a children's entertainer. So this is a relative clause, and it should be written in between two commas. So the sentence would read, Mysterious Malcolm, who's a children's entertainer, wows his audiences with his magic tricks. This relative clause could easily be removed and the sentence will still make sense. Mysterious Malcolm wows his audiences with his magic tricks. This is another example of a complex sentence using a relative clause. The astronaut bounded towards a space buggy, which had been parked in a crater. Now this relative clause is giving extra information about the space buggy. This is why I must put a comma before the relative pronoun. Can you spot the complex sentences in this text? How have they been created? The sun was beginning to disappear behind the nearby mountain. Philip's heart sank as he knew he was lost. The group of climbers who Philip had started out with were nowhere to be seen. Philip shouted for help, but it was hopeless. While there was still a little light, Philip tried to make himself a bed using leaves and twigs. The temperature, which was now close to 0 degrees, could be extremely hazardous. If he couldn't find a way to keep warm, he would be in serious danger. It was going to be a long night. As you can see, these are all the complex sentences. Get a piece of paper and write down each one and write next to it if it's a complex sentence because it contains a subordinating conjunction or if it contains a relative clause. Now these sentences are not complex sentences. The first one is just a regular simple sentence. It's extended using a prepositional phrase, behind the nearby mountain. The second sentence is a compound sentence and it is using the coordinating conjunction but. Coordinating conjunctions are also known as fanboys. It was going to be a long night is just a regular simple sentence. It has one complete thought. Now, which of these examples are complex sentences? Try to find them and explain why. Please pause the video. As you can see, these are the two complex sentences. The first one is a complex sentence because it contains a relative clause. The second one is a complex sentence because it begins with a subordinating conjunction and contains a subordinate clause. That's the end of our video. I hope you have understood everything and grasped everything. Please make sure to do your homework assigned and I will see you on our next video. Bye guys!